Good morning, I'm Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Zinklea Samoa. Joe Fryer is off today. Right now on Morning News Now, wartime rendezvous. A high-stakes meeting in Kyiv shrouded in secrecy. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin arriving yesterday. A move signaling unwavering support for President Zelenskyy and his country.
We're seeing that when it comes to Russia's war aims, Russia is failing, Ukraine is succeeding. We will have American diplomats back in Ukraine starting next week. We're doing it with the security of our personnel foremost in mind, but we're doing it.
More on this historic meeting as Russia ramps up its military assault in the east. Up in the air as confusion mounts over the question of whether or not to mask. With cases on the rise from coast to coast, now more than half of states are seeing an uptick, bolstered by that new BA2 subvariant. And that's prompting some colleges to rethink their mandates, how the nation's students are reacting. Also this morning, southbound immigration and the crisis at our southern border coming back into focus for the GOP. Later today, a delegation of 10 top Republicans led by House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy will visit the border. Plus, the ongoing search for a missing Texas National Guardsman now adding a tragic backdrop to the visit. We begin with the latest from Ukraine in a first since the war began. High-ranking U.S. officials slipped into the war-torn country to meet with President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
Yeah. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin's visit comes as Russia's attacks in eastern Ukraine have intensified. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin joins us now from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Hey, Aaron, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, here in Kyiv, the U.S. Embassy remains sealed off as it has been since the beginning of this war. But that's about to change. On Sunday, the U.S. Secretaries of State and Defense visited the Ukrainian capital with promises of more military aid and diplomacy they say is necessary to win this war. For the first time since the beginning of this 60-day war, top U.S. officials visited the Ukrainian capital. President Zelenskyy greeting the U.S. Secretaries of State and Defense in a visit shrouded in secrecy.
What a pleasure it is to see you in person.
Promising an additional $700 million in foreign military aid. Secretary Austin says the goal is to make sure Russia suffers significant military losses.
We want to see Russia weakened to the degree that it can't do the kinds of things that it has done in invading Ukraine.
Blinken also announcing the nomination of a new U.S. ambassador, Bridget Brink, and the return of U.S. diplomats to Ukraine. This morning, President Zelenskyy thanking the United States for the support. At a press conference before the visit held at one of the capital's subway stations, doubling as a presidential bomb shelter, I asked President Zelenskyy about his message to the U.S. secretaries. Why is it important for high-ranking U.S. officials to visit the Ukrainian capital? And what do you plan to tell them? We are expecting specific things and specific weapons, he says. This while on Orthodox Easter weekend, fighting raged on across the Donbass region. Inside the besieged port city of Mariupol, despite calls for a truce and hundreds of civilians trapped, Ukrainian officials say the Russians stormed and bombarded the old steel plant, the last Ukrainian stronghold. And this morning, fires are burning at two oil-related sites in the Russian city of Bryansk, close to the Ukrainian border. And yet in the capital, at the Good Bakery, faced with darkness and despair, the smell of fresh-baked bread and compassion, bringing smiles to people's faces. Carefully packing the loaves into boxes to bring Easter cheer to the capital's war-torn suburbs.
Our bread is hope, and we work with hope.
Ukraine on this Orthodox Easter with death and destruction everywhere, there is also hope and the indomitable spirit of the Ukrainian people. Secretary Blinken says the United States will restore its diplomatic presence in Ukraine this week, and he said that they will restore the diplomatic presence in Kyiv as soon as possible. Savannah?
Aaron McLaughlin, thank you so much. Let's now get more on the situation in Ukraine with Joe Cerencioni. He's a distinguished fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft and a familiar face here now on this show. Joe, thanks for joining us this morning. So what did you make of that surprise visit to Ukraine by Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin, and also the military assistance that was pledged there? And also, just quickly, are you disappointed at all that we didn't see President Biden go, as we have with prime ministers and such from European countries?
I think this is still a very risky visit, so I wouldn't expect to see the president there. But it shows the courage of Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, and this surprise and heartening visit to the Capitol. Remember, it was just 2 months ago that the U.S. was offering to fly President Zelenskyy out, and now we're flying U.S. officials in. And they bring with them, of course, last week's announcement of $800 million worth of new aid, the first significant large-scale shipment of heavy equipment. We're talking about armored personnel vehicles, artillery, helicopters. You can see the U.S. is ramping up the kind of equipment we're giving them, closer to Zelenskyy's requests for heavy equipment to fight this Donbass assault. And now it's accompanied by a diplomatic offensive. We're seeing U.S. officials flying back to Kyiv this week to start to reopen the U.S. embassy, following moves by countries like Britain to open theirs. We expect the U.S. embassy to reopen within the next couple of weeks.
That question to, of course, which President Zelenskyy famously answered, I need ammunition, not a riot. And you're right. Now we're seeing people head there. I want to ask you now about Mariupol. So the Russians announced this morning a ceasefire at this steel plant. There's supposedly civilians holed up there. It's also really this last pocket of resistance. The Russians say they are in control of that city with the exception of this facility. What's your view, though, on the situation in Mariupol? What do you think the situation is on the ground between the Russians and the Ukrainian defense? And how important would this particular city be for Russia to capture?
Well, all the reports indicate that the Russian control of this city is tenuous. They continue to meet resistance in almost every area of the capital. That is to say, as their tanks and other vehicles move through the city, they continue to be attacked. It's actually miraculous that the steel plant is still there, still holding out against the kind of bombardment that they're getting. I'm sure they feel relieved that there's a ceasefire, however temporary, at the site. It's hard to believe they can hold out for very long, because what the Russians want is to secure Mariupol so they can start moving supplies to and from Donbass and Crimea. The whole purpose of this seizure of this city is to establish a land bridge in southeastern Ukraine to connect the two regions already under Russian control. Mariupol, it looks like, will fall completely in the next few days, perhaps a week, but not yet.
And now, Joe, I want to ask you about a meeting that's happening tomorrow. So the UN Secretary General is visiting Moscow to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in this fresh effort, a renewed try at ending this war. But Ukrainians are pouring cold water on that meeting. First, let's listen to what Deputy Head of President Zelenskyy's office said on Meet the Press yesterday, and we'll talk on the other side.
This is not a good idea to travel to Moscow. We do not understand his intention to travel to Moscow and to talk to President Putin.
So are there any hopes for these peace talks? Are there any hopes for these peace talks? What's the purpose then?
Well, I cannot tell you. I mean, any peace talks are good if they end with the result. I really doubt if those peace talks organized by Secretary General of the UN would end up with any result.
So what do you make of those comments? Essentially, someone from President Zelensky's office expressing this dismay. Also, when you think about what the potential for those peace talks are and what you just mentioned just a moment ago with Mariupol potentially falling to Russia, what types of things come into play in peace talks, and is there any hope here?
Well, I understand the Ukrainian frustration, and it's unlikely you're going to get a peace plan, but I got to back the UN effort here. You have to keep open the channel of communications. In the end, there's going to have to be some negotiated peace settlement, and so the UN could play a key role here. Neither Ukraine nor Russia are likely to militarily prevail, so you got to keep diplomatic options open.
Joe Cerencioni, as always, thank you so much. We so appreciate your expertise and your time this morning.
Thank you.
Staying in Ukraine, over the weekend, Russia stepped up its attacks on the port city of Odessa, killing at least 8 civilians. NBC News correspondent Kelly Kobiea is in Odessa with more on one of the youngest victims of that violence. Good morning, Kelly.
Yeah, good morning to you. Just an absolutely tragic story. Among the victims, 3 generations of the same family, a baby girl, her mother, and her grandmother. Here's what we know. A missile came from that direction. It hit the front of the building and went straight through to the back. An absolutely devastating attack here as the war enters a third month.
As Russian forces attack Ukraine's eastern and southern regions, the Ukrainian president met with two top U.S. officials, Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin in Kyiv. The U.S. promising an additional $700 million in military aid. Secretary Austin says the goal is to make sure Russia suffers significant military losses.
We want to see Russia weakened to the degree that it can't do the kinds of things that it has done in invading Ukraine.
It comes just a day after Russian missiles struck the economically vital port city of Odessa in southern Ukraine. One hitting this 16-story apartment building, killing 8 people and leaving 18 others wounded. This is the aftermath of the bombing, the first time a civilian structure in the city has been hit. As rescuers brought survivors to safety, terrified residents here shaken by the attack. Among those killed in the strike, a mother and her 3-month-old baby girl. In an address posted on Saturday, President Zelenskyy asks, how did she threaten Russia? Born just weeks before the invasion began, Valerie Golden said her daughter's birth brought a new level of happiness. Their deaths coming just days after Russian officials said they plan to gain control of all of southern Ukraine. On Sunday, as many Ukrainians celebrated Orthodox Easter, some say they're preparing to fight back against the Russian forces.
Why do you feel it's important for you to join the effort?
Because we must protect, I must fight for them.
They are his young nieces and nephews, perhaps too young to fully understand the devastation of war, but living through all of it nonetheless. As you can see, the cleanup continues here this morning. The regional prosecutor's office here is investigating the strike on this apartment building as a war crime and as premeditated murder. Now, the Russian Defense Ministry said they weren't targeting civilian sites. They were targeting military installations here in Odessa, which is something that they say about a lot of strikes on civilian locations across the country. The Ukrainians say there simply are no military targets in this area. This is a residential neighborhood, but Sinclair were not able to verify either one of those claims. Sinclair.
Harrowing reporting. Important that we don't turn away, though. Kelly, thank you.
Emmanuel Macron has become the first French sitting president to be re-elected in 20 years. He defeated a challenge from far-right rival Marine Le Pen by securing just over 58% of the vote. NBC News senior international correspondent Keir Simmons is in Paris for us.
Hey there, Savannah. Good morning. This was not a change election. And with the current crisis in Europe, many Western leaders will be breathing a sigh of relief this morning. President Macron had warned the French voters that voting for his opponent would be like electing President Trump or voting for Brexit. In the end, the French people chose not to go that way. President Macron, victorious and relieved.
Merci.
Re-elected by an unexpectedly wide margin, 58 to 42%. Under the Eiffel Tower, elation among his supporters. It's 8 o'clock here at the Macron rally, and people have just gone crazy because they've just announced the result on the big screen here, the exit poll. Excusez-moi, how are you feeling?
All good?
Yeah, feeling...
It's a good future.
They're showing the actual, 58%.
58% for 42, yeah.
Overnight, congratulations from President Biden. The vote for Macron, widely seen as a vote for continuity amid the turmoil of war in Europe. France rejecting the prospect of a pro-Putin president in Paris. Marine Le Pen supporters devastated.
I'm very disappointed because I really think that she will win.
Le Pen losing for the third time, defiant. It was unprecedented for a far-right candidate, the highest vote total since World War II, underscoring deep frustrations across France.
It's going to be the same old mess, getting worse and worse.
And overnight, clashes with police on the streets of Paris. Protesters angry at the election of a leader critics say is an establishment elitist. President Macron vowing to find an answer to his people's anger. As they left his rally last night, many yearning for unity and opportunity.
I think he needs to listen to the people of France, because if he doesn't, Le Pen or the next one may win, and it will be very dangerous for the country.
But globally, Savannah, this will be viewed as an historic election. President Zelenskyy was one of the first to congratulate President Macron. And this morning, the Kremlin says President Putin has sent his congratulations. The challenge of Ukraine will be one of the many tasks now facing President Macron. Savannah?
Absolutely. Keir Simmons, thank you so much.
Back in the U.S., Republican lawmakers are heading to the southern border today as the debate over the Biden administration's immigration policies intensifies. NBC's Morgan Chesky joins us from Eagle Pass, Texas, where the group will be later today. Good morning, Morgan.
Yeah, good morning, Zinkalei. And it'll be House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy who's expected to lead that group here in Eagle Pass later today. They're expected to, of course, talk about immigration, but specifically Title 42. That is the policy that has turned away so many asylum seekers here at the U.S.-Mexico border since the start of the pandemic. Meantime, in Washington, President Biden's meeting with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus to discuss rolling back this policy, a move that's now facing bipartisan pushback.
This morning, the latest clash over border policy.
We won't just fight to secure the border. We will secure the border.
Republican lawmakers visiting Eagle Pass, Texas today, drawing attention to what they see as a crisis on the border that will only be exacerbated by the Biden administration's plans to end Title 42, a public health policy that allows for the expedited removal of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border during the COVID-19 pandemic. That measure, put in place by the Trump administration, has blocked more than 1.7 million attempts to cross the southern border. In March alone, accounting for half of the migrants expelled. Now Republicans say repealing Title 42 will lead to a bigger spike in migrants trying to enter the United States, just ahead of a summer surge.
Title 42 being lifted means 500,000 over the next 5 weeks. My state of Texas, we just simply can't absorb this.
Immigration advocates argue Title 42 is being used as an immigration enforcement tool rather than a public health measure.
Look, Title 42 is not consistent with our values, and it doesn't keep us safer.
But a growing number of Democrats, including some in key midterm races, have spoken out against the policy change. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly warning that this administration's lack of a plan to deal with this crisis will further strain our border communities. The White House says they are preparing.
That includes moving officers, agents, DHS volunteer force, personnel to rapidly decompress points along the border and more efficiently process migrants.
Texas Congressman Henry Cuellar, a Democrat whose district includes part of the border, calling the administration hypocritical.
How can we have the emergency, federal public emergency extended to July 15th and say there's a pandemic going on in the United States, but at the border, everything's fine, and just let people into the United States?
Now, the Department of Homeland Security says they anticipate up to 170,000 migrants crossing the border when Title 42 is rolled back on May 23rd. Now, this week in Washington, DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is expected to testify on Capitol Hill, and officials tell NBC News that the White House views this as a chance for him to outline the framework in which they would roll back Title 42, but also suggest that Congress could take action on immigration and Title 42. We'll send it back to you.
Morgan, thank you. Let's now get a check on your morning news now. Weather?
Michelle Grossman joins us now. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning to you both. And we are looking at some record-breaking weather today. Temperatures in the southeast really, really warm. While we're looking in the Midwest, we're looking at really cold temperatures. So it's sort of the battle of the seasons. Taking a look at the temperatures, though, in the southeast, we're looking at temperatures in the mid to upper 80s. So we could break some records. We're going to watch that as we go throughout the day. We're going to hold on to that warmth, too, through the mid-Atlantic as well. Norfolk, Virginia, 81 degrees. That's 12 degrees, what is above normal for this time of year. 78 degrees in Lexington, 85 in Knoxville, 85 in Athens. Back behind that, though, we're looking at some really cold air funneling down from Canada. And then we're going to see those temperatures dipping later in the week. We're looking at Columbus into the 50s, New York City 57 on Thursday, and Raleigh, you're in the 80s today, but only at 69 on Thursday. So enjoy the warmth today because we're going to be back to normal by midweek. We are unsettled, too, in the middle of the nation. We're looking at a cold front. It's a long one stretching from Buffalo, New York, all the way to parts of Texas, and we're looking at storms along that cold front. We're not expecting a severe weather outbreak. We're not expecting strong tornadoes. We do have a low risk for tornadoes with some of these storms. We could see some damaging winds, but the main concern will be excessive rainfall. We could see some flooding. We do have a flood watch in parts of the lower Mississippi Valley. So this is what it looks like. We're looking at some heavy rain. That's where you're seeing the darker colors, the reds, the oranges, the yellows, even seeing some lightning strikes as well. And that will all move off to the east as we head throughout the next couple of days. But your rainfall forecast, most of the heaviest rain in parts of Texas, Louisiana. We're looking at 1 to 2, even up to 3 inches of rain. So we did have a flood threat. Looks like that was dropped. That's good news as we head throughout the rest of today. But we could see winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. Could even see some hail with some of these storms. Back to you guys.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much.
Sure.
And coming up, ongoing confusion over one simple question this morning: to mask or not to mask.
With cases rising again, some colleges are rethinking their rules. We'll have reactions from students this is directly impacting. You're watching Morning News Now. Welcome back. These days, back to school has college students thinking about classes, campus life, and COVID. COVID cases are on the rise across the country, including on college campuses. The increase comes just weeks after thousands of students return from spring break. But as more people prepare for summer vacation, many are looking for more clarity on the changing guidelines for masks on public transportation. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch joins us now from Columbia University in New York City with more on this. Jesse, good morning.
Good morning to you. Yeah, here in Columbia, just one of the schools where masks are making a classroom comeback. But as they go back on in some settings, they're coming off in other places, like on airplanes and on trains as well. And this sudden shift has some people still wondering what the rules actually are.
This morning, America's mask debate showing no signs of letting up.
I understand everybody's in a hurry to get their masks off, but we're older and we're in no hurry.
And there's still plenty of confusion out there. While a federal judge struck down the CDC's mandatory mask order on planes, some airports, including LAX, still require them, leaving passengers perplexed.
I don't even have one on me. I don't think I needed to.
At least 31 states seeing an uptick in COVID cases over the last 2 weeks, prompting some colleges nationwide to bring masks back.
I kind of just laughed because it was like 2 weeks ago. I feel like they just got rid of it.
Including UConn, Syracuse, and Columbia University.
I think it's appropriate because if the numbers get too high, they don't want to compromise the graduation.
We're still in the pandemic. I don't care what other people do, but, I'm keeping mine on.
The mask inconsistency combined with the spread of COVID subvariants now raising more questions about what's ahead.
What do you say to someone who says, well, it looks kind of just like the spread of the common cold now?
While it might feel like it's the spread of the common cold, we still have people who are getting severe illness from it. We still have too many people unvaccinated or ineligible for a vaccine, such as under 5.
I asked Dr. Patel as well how long before we could see the impact of maskless flying. She said people who traveled over the weekend could start feeling symptoms or testing positive as early as today or tomorrow. And Clay, back to you.
Jesse Kirsch, important reporting on an issue that's left a lot of people confused. Thank you.
Let's now bring in Dr. Bob Lahita for more. Dr. Lahita is the director of the Institute for Autoimmune and Rheumatic Diseases at St. Joseph Health, also a professor of medicine at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine, and a clinical professor of medicine at Rutgers, and an author and a friend of the show. Doctor, always great to have you with us. Good morning. So what do you think here? Are colleges doing the right thing by enforcing these mask mandates? Should the students be concerned on these campuses?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It's very clear that the pandemic is not over. And unfortunately, or fortunately, this is the end of the academic year, so the students can stay at home and they can do their studies from home. Graduation could be a problem, however, and everybody will likely wear masks during the ceremonies. It's important to keep the students disease-free.
Let's talk about something that the Biden administration says it's planning to expand. That's education about COVID medicines, like the Pfizer antiviral pill. Why are these types of therapeutics important? Why aren't more people taking advantage of them? And what do you think about this idea to expand education of them specifically?
Well, the education should be expanded among doctors because a lot of doctors and nurses have no idea of what these medicines are or how to get them. That's Paxlovid in the Pfizer case, and with Merck, Molnupiravir. Both of these are antivirals. And you might remember that the Biden administration said one of their issues and policies was test and treat. So if you test positive and you become ill, you can be treated with Paxlovid or Molnupiravir prior to going to the hospital. The idea is to keep you out of the hospital, out of the emergency room, and out of the ICU.
An important distinction there, education for doctors. Doctor, I also want to ask you about COVID in China and the approach that they've taken and how it's working. So Beijing is the latest city to crack down on COVID restrictions as the virus rapidly spreads throughout that city. Last hour, we talked about measures being taken in Shanghai. Why are their quarantine policies not working, or is that how you would assess it? But we're seeing these widespreading of COVID cases in these cities that are so locked down. What lessons can we take away here?
Well, Savannah, this is not going to work in the United States. And I'll tell you why. Because you're dealing with 26 million people in the city of Shanghai, for example. Of those, only 328 are symptomatic. There's about 13,000 that are asymptomatic. But imagine testing 26 million people twice a week, which is what they're doing. And they're separating children from their parents. And this simply does not work, Savannah.
All right, Dr. Bob Lahida, as always, thank you so much. And it's great to see you.
Thank you.
Coming up, Amazon workers are bringing the fight to unionize to another warehouse on Staten Island, and they've got some big-time support from top D.C. Democrats ahead of the vote today. We'll have a live report.
And speaking of Amazon, as e-commerce booms, product returns are on the rise as well. But a lot of the time, your unwanted products don't head back to store shelves. They head somewhere else. We'll tell you where up next. There's a new Amazon package that could be making its way to Staten Island. Inside a union, on the heels of a historic win earlier this month, workers at a second New York City Amazon warehouse are set to begin voting this morning on whether or not to unionize. NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton joins us now from Staten Island with more on what we can expect. Antonia, good morning. First off, how did this group of Amazon workers get to this point, and what kind of support are they getting for their efforts to unionize?
Good morning, Zincle. Look, this movement has been in the works for actually a couple years, and it really got started in the pandemic with current and former Amazon employees who were really concerned about their treatment by the company during this critical period of time, feeling like there weren't enough protections and protocols in place for employees back in 2020. And what happened then is they started a grassroots movement, worker-to-worker conversations. They would often meet at places like bus stops to talk about the conditions, the things they'd like to see change, the pay that they feel they deserve. And that movement really grew. It ultimately culminated in the successful vote that you just mentioned from a couple weeks ago. And now this is going to be the second warehouse in Staten Island to bring this to a vote. And because this is the second one, and it's really become this David and Goliath style story, right, of workers, many of them very young, going up against Jeff Bezos, that's drawn in a lot of support from D.C. Democrats like Senator Sanders and Representative Ocasio-Cortez. Take a listen to some of what they shared with workers yesterday.
So what you are doing here is sending a message to every worker in America that the time is now to stand up to our oligarchy, to stand up to this excessive corporate greed.
And so what happened here, out here, right, that you guys did in Staten Island was just the beginning. It was the first domino to fall, the first one. And then we're going to have another election tomorrow, and we're going to support them.
When you talk to workers, what they'll tell you has really made the difference in this unionization effort is the fact that it was grassroots, that it was initially worker to worker, and that people like Senator Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez didn't get involved in their organizing efforts until much later. And they believe that that sort of relational work of it being this sort of genuine thing from colleague to colleague is what's allowed them to get to this point and to make a successful movement, Zincle.
And Antonia, this is not the first union vote we've seen around the country. How are these Staten Island warehouse workers feeling about the potential for another union right here?
Well, we got to talk to some folks, and the reaction was all over the place. What's interesting about this site that's a little different from the first warehouse that went to vote, which was called JFK 8, is that this is a site that has a lot of young workers who work part-time. And when you're a part-time worker, it can make organizing more difficult, in part because you're not around as often, you're not working shoulder to shoulder with people for, say, 12 hours at a time, and often you're young and you may be planning to leave the job in not that much time anyway. And so this is an interesting site for this next vote because it poses a larger challenge to organizers than the first location. Actually, take a listen to some of the conversations that we had that reflect the entire spectrum, from folks who aren't so sure they're interested in a union to others who believe this is really the important next step.
I'm against it for right now, but I also want to see what's done in that building as well before I could say like, okay, yes, I support the union. I want to see what it could do for help for me as well.
They started these captive audience meetings where they'd literally stop production, an all hands on deck anti-union meeting with the general manager of the building, giving some sob story about his family, and the vice president of HR, basically begging us to vote no.
No matter what we see happen with this specific warehouse here, this is really becoming a national movement, and it's not just limited to Amazon. There are young workers, diverse workers at places like Starbucks and Apple that are doing the same work. And so this is really a moment when a movement is being revitalized, right? Because unionization membership had been going down for decades here in the United States. And now we're seeing young people of all backgrounds, like you just saw there, want more of a seat at the table at their jobs, Zinkley.
And Antonia, quickly, what's next after the vote, and what happens if the vote is unsuccessful?
Well, if the vote is unsuccessful for the workers here at this site, life kind of continues on and work is going to move on as normal. But as I just mentioned, this is really what people think of now as a movement. There are already other Amazon warehouses that are filing to move forward with a vote, that are starting to contact the Amazon labor union, expressing their interest in doing the same. And Amazon is spending millions of dollars on consultants and anti-union efforts. And that suggests that they know that this fight is going to be going on for a while.
Antonia, important reporting. Thank you so much.
Now, shopping is easier than ever thanks to the internet, but the explosion in online shopping also means a lot of people are returning things. And actually, apparently, what happens once you return them might surprise us. Is that right?
Please tell us. Senior consumer investigative correspondent Vicki Nguyen joins us this morning with a behind-the-scenes look at how millions of products are being revamped and resold. Good morning, Vicki.
I mean, I consider myself a pretty Olympic-level shopper, and I was surprised at what happens to some of these returns. And a lot of it has to do with our online shopping. Good morning to you. Good morning to you at home. Online shopping, online returns, all of it is easier than ever, but it does come at a major cost to the environment. Not only are we packaging and shipping more items back and forth, we're also seeing millions of items ending up in landfills, even when they could be resold. Well, that is all changing. Take a look at how you can shop smarter, reduce waste, and save money.
Point, click, buy. E-commerce reached an all-time high in 2021, an estimated $469 billion in sales, but shoppers return more than 20% of those purchases.
And it's easy to see why. The packages come right to your door. If you don't like it, it doesn't fit, no problem. Most retailers will let you repackage the item and ship it back to them for a full refund.
While you might expect the returns to go back on store shelves, they often end up here, the dump. By one estimate, 25% of returned items go to a landfill, leading to 9.6 billion pounds of waste last year.
As they say, one person's trash is another person's treasure. And that is certainly the case here at Liquidity Services. Here at this massive warehouse, they specialize in giving a second life to millions of products that have been returned.
The high-tech facility near Dallas is one of 7 across North America that refurbish up to 10 million returned products every month. Some have been used, others are brand new or simply in damaged packaging. Liquidity Services is one of the largest companies in a growing industry called reverse logistics.
Garbage is a dirty word here. That's throwing money away. So we're going to resell everything we can.
My tour guide, Vice President Jeff Rexegol, says they salvage more than 99% of the products they receive.
This TV looks totally smashed up, like it should go to the landfill, but you're saying no?
This is a great example of trash to treasure. So this does have a broken screen, as we can see here. But next to it, we have the same model of TV that has an audio problem. So we have two TVs that have an issue. What we're going to do is we're going to take these two and create one great TV by taking this screen off and putting it on this one.
Throughout the day, workers unload tractor trailers full of returned items, furniture, clothing, camping gear, exercise equipment, anything.
Sometimes we don't even know what's in it, and so we'll receive a pallet. We'll go through and identify each item.
So it's a surprise box.
It is.
Christmas morning every day.
That's right.
Can we open this?
Let's go.
I feel like I'm opening a present. Ow! Clothes! Just like what I'd find under my tree.
Then the products are inspected and categorized. Some end up in this giant warehouse, waiting to be resold at a fraction of the retail price.
What does that mean for me as a consumer? Do I get it for a discount?
Consumers can get great deals on refurbished merchandise, up to 50 or 60% off.
Electronics are some of the most harmful discarded materials because they can release heavy metals and toxins that pollute our air, soil, and water. Here, they help keep electronics in use.
It all happens in this electronics triage room where the products come rolling in on this conveyor belt and they're cleaned, they're tested, they're repaired, whatever's needed to get them ready for resale.
Even the cardboard and styrofoam packaging get recycled again and again.
2 containers of this turns into 1 block of this, which will get turned back into that. But we're helping the environment. We're keeping those products out of landfills and using them to create great deals for consumers.
And you can do your part, too.
The best thing to do if you're thinking about returning the item is to try to keep it in its original packaging, because the moment it no longer looks brand new, the chances of it ending up in a landfill go up significantly. And if it's clothing, of course, always keep the tags on. And never wear the items outside or get them dirty.
And take a moment to think before you click buy. Ask, do I need this? And will I keep it? That pause can help you save money and protect the planet.
And if you do end up with something you don't want to keep and you can afford not to return it, consider giving the item to a friend who would use it, or donating it if you can. That certainly cuts down on the carbon cost of those trucks and planes going back and forth. Savannah, you have all those placemats from Thanksgiving, I hear. We've got a big family. We could use that. We could use that stuff. Keep it in the back of your closet.
Not at the returns, but you're right about donating.
Yes.
It is actually such a great way. Or I give my sister something that I'm like, oh, I missed the deadline. This would look cute on you.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Perfect. Regift it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of options. Vicki, thank you for breaking it down.
Thank you, Vicki. So interesting. Yeah.
Coming up, kickoff, an historic moment is set to unfold in the world of football.
Yeah, with the NFL draft just days away, we'll introduce you to the first expected pick with same-sex parents. That story is next. Some sad news to report this morning. Former Today Show co-host and NBC News correspondent Jim Hartz has died. He was known for his time on the Today Show co-hosting alongside Barbara Walters in the 1970s. He covered several big stories, including the resignation of President Richard Nixon and the end of the Vietnam War. He also spent several years working in local news and hosted the PBS celebrity talk show Over Easy. Hartz was 82 years old.
A powerful legacy, Savannah.
Absolutely, especially in these halls here.
Thank you so much. And this is a big week for football fans. The NFL draft starts Thursday night with the lifelong dreams of dozens of elite college athletes coming true. NBC News correspondent Kristen Dahlgren went to Colorado for the story of one of those top athletes who stands out from the pack.
Hey there, Trey McBride was a standout the last 2 seasons at Colorado State. And in just a few days, he'll find out which NFL team he'll be suiting up for on Sundays. When he does, his supporting section will be making their own history.
Trey McBride has all the attributes of a future NFL star. Size, skills, swagger.
Have you practiced in the mirror the whole, Trey McBride, Colorado State University?
No, not yet. I'm ready, though.
But at this weekend's NFL draft, he's poised to make history because Trey has something no NFL player before him has had: same-sex parents.
I'm excited to see him just live his dream. I mean, when your kid comes to you when they're little and they say they want to be president, you're like, okay, honey, that's great. I mean, he wanted to play in the NFL, and He's going to do it.
Trey is one of 5 children born to his mother, Kate, and her longtime partner, Jen. They started their family in the mid-1990s when 2 women having children together was rare.
I think getting pregnant with Bryce was a little bit different. They actually considered me a single mom. And I do remember telling my parents that I'm pregnant, and they said, why would you want to have a baby as a single woman? And I said, I'm not a single woman. I'm in a relationship.
Kate and Jen were at the forefront of growing change and understanding in America and the model of supportive parents.
They've done a great job of, pushing me to be the best version of myself and just, constantly giving support and love.
The significance of this moment is not lost on Trey, but it's also not his focus.
I think it could, really be that platform to kind of help change things and kind of shine light on this. But really, it's just normal to me. It's something that I've been with my whole life. It's not anything that I know differently.
I know kids can be mean. Did you worry people saying ignorant things to the kids?
You always worry about your kids, and because we were all kids, we know how kids are. But, the main thing is with them is be confident in who you are. You come from a family that every single one of us are in your corner, no matter what, any time of the day.
And which one of you said, who's going to pick on the biggest kid in the... Tell me that.
Exactly. He was a big boy, so I don't know that anybody would pick on him.
So what was it like growing up here?
It was awesome, such a rural community.
Trey has built on Kate and Jen's confidence and support to become an elite athlete. In his senior season, he was the best tight end in college football, leading Division I in his position in receptions and yards and earning himself the John Mackey Award, voted the top TE in the nation. Now he's likely to be the first tight end to have his name called from the draft podium this weekend.
That's awesome. Did you guys ever think that you would raise a professional football player?
I don't think that we thought in our minds that we were like, oh, hey, he said he wanted to be one, so we said, great, be whatever you want to be. He was always fantastic, always a fantastic athlete.
Trey, when you hear your parents so proud of you, and you probably don't tell them this enough, but what does that do to your heart?
Yeah, it's pretty special. It's, heartwarming, and, they've been great role models for me and my brothers, so it's just, it's cool to see, how they've raised us, and it's just very special for us. So,
do you tell them thank you?
Yeah, I do all the time. I think it's it's very special. It's cool, and I'm just grateful for them. So.
Aw, you guys look at him with such pride. I like that.
More important than him playing in the NFL or anything is he's a good human. He's a good kid. So that's most important.
Kate and Jen said they have no preference for a certain team to draft him, but they added they hope it's somewhere warm and it's somewhere that loves him. Back to you.
A heartwarming report. Kristen Dahlgren, thank you so much.
Now we want to end by congratulating one of our own here at NBC. Nightly news anchor Lester Holt was inducted into the National Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame over the weekend in Las Vegas. Lester was supposed to be inducted last October, but the ceremony was pushed back because of the pandemic, of course. He's been with us here at NBC News since 2000. He's co-anchored Weekend Today, Dateline, and of course, now Nightly News. Basically, he has done and does do it all. Lester, congratulations. Best of the best.
Yes.
On camera, off camera, in the hallways.
Truly.
Yeah.
A legend and incredible to be considered a colleague and learn from him every day.
And most importantly, just such an amazing person. And so someone who is so giving of his knowledge with people who come through these halls. It's very neat to see.
It makes a difference. So congrats, Lester. And thanks to everyone for watching. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.